to tutorial 3, which is on vector spaces in the course MA 106 Linear Algebra. Let us begin. So the first problem says that show that the only possible subspaces of R3 are the following three. That is, the first is the zero space, then is the line passing through the origin, planes passing through the origin, and the whole space, that is R3. Okay, so let us begin with recalling the definition of lines and planes in R3. So in three-dimensional, lines cannot be described by a single linear equation. So they are frequently equations where where t is the parameter, x, y, z are all the functions of the independent variable t, which varies over the real numbers. Okay, and as x0, y0, z0 is a fixed point on the line. ABC are related to slope of the line. That is, they are parallel to the line. The vector ABC is parallel to the line. Okay. Next is the definition of plane. So in three dimensions, R0 be a position vector, fixed position vector of some point P0, let's say x0, y0, z0, and let n be a non-zero vector, which is ABC. The plane determined by the point P0 and the vector n consists of those points P with the position vector R, such that the vector drawn from P0 to P is perpendicular to n. Okay, and we know very well that two vectors are perpendicular if and only if their dot product is 0. So according to that, the desired plane can be obtained by this equation, which means if we find the set of all points which are perpendicular to a particular non-zero vector, then we may say that that particular collection of points in R3 is indeed a space in R3. Okay, so let's come back to our question. So we need to determine all the possible subspaces of R3. So very first, let W be a subspace of R3. Therefore, dimension of W will be less than equal to dimension of R3, which is equal to 3. So therefore, the possible dimensions of W are 0, 1, 2, and 3. In the first case, when dimension of W is equals to 0, it is clear that W is spanned by the 0 vector, and therefore the space W will exactly be the zero-dimensional space. Okay. Next, in the case when dimension of W is equals to 1, then we may write W as a span of some vector U in R3. Okay, and the elements of W can be characterized by W is equals to alpha U, where alpha is scalar belonging to R. Therefore, clearly by the definition that we saw before, B equal to alpha U represents line in R3. Okay, and moreover, we note that since W is a subspace and 0 lies inside every subspace, therefore W has to pass through origin. Okay, next we'll deal with the case when dimension of W is equal to 2. In this case, it will be spanned by two vectors. Okay, let's say U and V. And we are clearly linearly independent because of the definition. Okay, we are choosing U and V to be basis of W. All right. Now, clearly, U, V, and U cross V, they form a basis. Why do they form a basis? Because U cross V is linearly independent to U and V. Okay, it is very easy to see this. Like I'll just say it in words. So if U cross V is linearly dependent on U and V, then U cross V can be written as some alpha U plus beta V, where alpha, beta are scalars. Then you just take dot product with U and dot product with V to see that alpha and beta are 0 respectively. Okay, because we know that U cross V is perpendicular to the vector U as well as V. Therefore, the dot product will be equal to 0, as we recalled earlier. Okay, and therefore it will form a basis. So we know that these three are linearly independent, and we also know that the maximal linearly independent set is a basis. Therefore, U, V, and U cross V form a basis for R3. Now we'll see what kind of elements come in W. Okay, so let W belong to capital W. Then W can be written as a linear combination of U and V. Okay, then W is perpendicular to U cross V. Yeah. So why will that happen? Because when we take the dot product and we distribute the dot product, it turns out to be 0. So the two vectors have dot product equal to 0, and therefore they both are perpendicular to each other. Okay. Conversely, we impose the condition on any particular vector in R3 such that Z, the vector, is perpendicular to U cross V, then we show that Z belongs to W. And this will directly show that W is indeed a space in R3. Okay, so if W is in R3 such that this happens, we may write Z as linear combination of U, V, and U cross V, because we've seen that it forms the basis for R3. Next, we take scalar product. That is the dot product on both sides with respect to U cross V, and we obtain that gamma is equals to 0. Yeah, so which forces that Z belongs to W. So W consists of all the elements which are perpendicular to U cross V. Therefore, it follows that W is a plane. Again, by the same reasoning that W is a subspace, 0 belongs to W, we have that W is a plane which passes through the origin. Please feel free to interrupt me if you have any doubts. Lastly, we deal with the case when dimension of W is equal to 3. In this case, we show that W indeed turns out to be equal to R3. Okay, so because dimension of W is equals to 3, we take W to be spanned by U, V, and little w, which form basis for capital W. Okay, now because these three vectors E1, E2, and E3 also belongs to W, and U, V, W form a basis, we may write E1, E2, E3 as a linear combination of these. Okay, next, let alpha will be equal to D1 E1 plus, okay, this is the mistake. So here it should be little w. We take any w in little w in capital W. So it can be written as D1 E1 plus D2 E2 plus D3 E3, where di's are in R. Okay, so by the above equation, it again implies that this w will be written as a linear combination of U, V, and capital W in W. Okay, we are taking this vector, any arbitrary vector in R3. Okay, this is by abuse of notation. Okay, I should have taken some other vector. This is a vector in R3. Okay, so it can be written as linear combination of E1, E2, E3. And using the above equations, again, substituting the value of E1, E2, and E3 in terms of U, V, and W, it follows that this alpha, any arbitrary vector of R3, is again linear combination of U, V, and W, which means that the vector is in W, and W is obviously in R3. Therefore, it follows that capital W is exactly equal to R3. So this was one of the trickiest questions in this set of problems. So is there any doubt, or I may go ahead? Okay, yeah. So we move on to the next question. Problem 2. Here we have collection of particular kind of matrices, and we have to show that they form a vector space in MNC, and we have to compute their dimension by explicitly writing down a basis for each one of them. Okay, so let's begin with the first problem. We define A as, because we are taking entries in complex numbers, therefore each entry should have real and imaginary part. So we have AJK plus I times BJK belongs to MNC, such that A transpose is equal to A, which is the condition that is imposed here. Okay. Next, note that A transpose equal to A. What condition will it impose on A? That is the entries of A. It will impose this condition. Okay. For all J and K ranging between 1 and n. Okay, and therefore by equating the real and the imaginary part, we see that AKJ turns out to be AJK and BJK turns out to be BKJ for all J and K with this notation. All right. Next, in order to find basis, we set up some notations. So we denote capital E sub JK as n cross n matrix, having 1 at the jkth position and elsewhere having 0. Okay, so it is a basis of set of all symmetric matrix. Is this? This is what we claim. Okay. Now it is clear from the definition of A, by the way we have taken A, that this set clearly spans this. There is no doubt in that. You can take the required AIJs and BIJs to write capital A as a linear combination of these. Okay. But we have to show that these are linearly independent. So for that, what do we do to show that a set is linearly independent? We take, all right, yeah. So we take a linear combination, equated to 0, and then we show that each of the scalars, they are forced to be equal to 0. If that happens, then the elements will be linearly independent. So we see how that happens. When we expand this matrix, we know the definition of EIJs for all I and j. So we expand the left-hand side, and we see that the matrix on the LHS after expanding, okay, each entries, they will have, what will they have on diagonal? On diagonal, they will have alpha j plus iota times alpha j prime. Okay, and off diagonals, they will have alpha jk plus I times alpha jk prime. Okay, and again, which is equal to 0. That means every such entry is equal to 0. And again, by equating real and imaginary part, we will see that all these scalars, they turn out to be 0. Okay, so I repeat this once again. So we just expand this left-hand side matrix to see what are each of the entries, and each of the entries have to be equated to 0 because the RHS is a 0 matrix. All right, and then by equating each entry to 0, we see that these such terms are equal to 0. But then equating real and imaginary part, we see that it forces all the scalars to be equal to 0, which completes the proof. Okay, now in order to finish, we need to find out the number of elements in the basis. So the dimension of this will be equal to n times n plus 1. Okay, we just need to count the number of elements here. We've shown that it spans, it clearly spans, in fact, and we've shown that it is linearly independent. So look at the cardinality of this set. It is clearly n times n plus 1. Therefore, the dimension of symmetric matrix is n times n plus 1, where the entries are taken from complex numbers. Okay, so please note that where are the entries coming from, whether they are complex numbers or they are real numbers. Okay, if it is real numbers, then it is a completely different scenario, and all the terms and expression and the value will change. All right. So next is a similar procedure that we need to do for Hermitian matrix. So I'll just skip this. We'll come back to this if time permits. There are many problems which I want to finish in this tutorial. Okay. So we move on to the problem 3. And here we have Pnx. This denotes the vector space consisting of 0 polynomial and all real polynomials of degree less than equal to n, where n is fixed. Let S be a subset of all polynomials Px in Pnx such that it satisfies the following condition. So we have to check if S is a subspace, and if so, we need to find out the dimension of S in each of the 3 cases, okay, separately. So here, first case is very easy. So I'll prove, we'll find the basis of the second and the third part. I've written the solution. You may see and get back to me if there are any doubts, okay? So please look at the second second subpart. That is, it says that P is an odd function, okay? So clearly 0 polynomial is an odd function, so 0 belongs to S. This is clear. So in order to show that it is a subspace, we already know that Pnx is a vector space. To show that any subset of a vector space is a subspace, we just need to show that it is closed under the addition and the scalar multiplication. So we take any 2 vectors, Px and Qx in S. So therefore we get that Px and Qx satisfy this, which is the definition of being odd function. Okay, and then we see what happens to the function Px plus alpha times Qx. Okay, so Px plus alpha times Qx, we have to show that it belongs to S. All right, so we look at P minus X plus alpha times Q minus X, but because P and Q are odd functions, it implies this, and minus is scalar, alpha is just a scalar, so minus can be taken out to get this. And this line will tell us that P plus alpha Q indeed is an odd function, which forces it to land into S. All right, so this implies that this lies inside S, and therefore S is a subspace. Once we know that it is a subspace, let us find out its dimension. So let Px be equal to A0 plus A1x plus A2x square and so on till Anxn. We take any arbitrary polynomial, okay, and then we impose this condition. We need to see which all polynomials lie in this S, capital S, when S satisfies this condition. Please note we are in this case when P is an odd function. All right. So this implies that, so what condition will it impose? We have to impose the condition that Px is equals to minus P of minus X. So it gives us this equation, and then cancelling out the terms, we get two cases. In the case when n is even, one is a case when n is odd. So where when n is even, we see that this is the equation. All right. So therefore it forces a0, a2, so until an to be equal to 0, because we see that all the coefficients of the even powers of x are 0, and therefore an is also in such a collection. All right. So ai is equal to 0 for all I even. So therefore the basis will be given by x, x cube, x5, so until x to the n minus 1. Please note that we have seen that 1, x, x square, and so on forms a basis. So therefore this being a subset will form a basis, and it will also span, as we see now. All right, these elements are Li, and it spans any vector in S. Because we have started with any vector Px in X, let's see how we can write it using linear combination of these elements which we claim as basis. So Px can be just written as this. Why is this happening? Because see that the coefficients corresponding to the even powers of x turn out to be 0 by imposing the condition that P is an odd function. So here we can clearly see that the cardinality is n by 2, which is valid because n is even in this case. Next, in the case when n is odd, doing a similar calculation, you may find that Px can be written as this. Please note that the basis will change when n is odd and n is even. All right. And here the dimension of S turns out to be n plus 1 by 2. Right? If n is odd, n plus 1 is even, so n plus 1 by 2 will be a valid natural number. Okay. So the third one can be done similarly. You have to just impose the condition. So you take a polynomial of degree n, okay, of degree less than equal to n, and just impose the condition that p prime of 0 and p double prime of 0 is equals to 0. And then you can see that dimension of S is equals to n minus 1. The trick here is that you need not prove for a subset to be a vector space, you need not prove all the 10 axioms. You just need to show that it is closed under scalar multiplication and addition. And that's what we have done in this case. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Problem number 4. All right. So here we have, let's have two matrices A and B. So they are called similar matrices if there exists an invertible matrix C. Please note that it says that there exists invertible matrix. All right. If there exists invertible matrix C such that B is equals to C inverse times A times C. So we have to prove that it is equivalence relation. They have equal traces and they have equal ranks. So let's proceed. So the first case for reflexivity, it is obvious to choose C equal to I. If we choose C equal to I, we see that A can be written as I inverse A I. So we see that by choosing C equal to A, the reflexivity property holds. Next, symmetry. In case of symmetry, we assume that A is similar to B and we prove that B is similar to A. Okay, so the obvious choice will be C inverse. So let's see how it happens. So if A is similar to B, then there exists invertible matrix C such that B is equals to C inverse AC. Yeah, and because C is invertible, we can pre-multiply by C and post-multiply by C inverse to see that this equation holds. And by definition, now you can see that we can switch the places of A and B. That is, now B is similar to A in this case. Next is transitivity. Transitivity, we need to club the two conditions. So let us assume that A is similar to B and B is similar to D. It will give us these two equations. That is, there exists C1 and C2 which satisfies these two properties. Okay. Then we have, now look at D. So here what we do is that we substitute the value of B over here. Okay, substituting the value of B over here yields us this. And now we see that choosing capital C to be C1 times C2, it is clear that A is similar to D. So we started with A is similar to B, B is similar to D, and this equation gives us that A is similar to D. Therefore, transitivity holds, right? Next, we need to show that similar matrices have equal trace. All right, so here, very first, we need to use the fact that trace of A times B is equals to trace of B times A. So let us prove this fact first. Let capital A be Aij, denoted by the entries Aij, and capital B with the matrix denoted by entries small bij's. Trace of AB can be given by AB is AB11 plus AB22, so on till ABNN, where ABII represents the ith diagonal entry of the matrix AB. That's what we need to consider. What is trace? Trace is the sum of all the diagonal entries of a matrix. Here we are calculating trace of AB, therefore we'll look at the sum of all the diagonal entries of the matrix AB. Okay, and when we expand this, we see that AB11 will turn out to be A11, B11 plus A12, B12, and so on. Okay, we expand each of the terms. We see each of the terms will be these. This is clear by the matrix multiplication. Yeah, by the value of matrix multiplication. Next, now the trick here is to see this entire sum as column sum. So here, if we look at this particular column, you can realize this particular column as BA11. That is the first diagonal entry of the matrix B times A. And similarly this, if you carefully observe that fact, so if view the sum according to the columns, then you see that it is trace of BA, because this particular thing is BA11, this is BA22, and this will be BANN, which is exactly equal to trace of the matrix B times A. Okay, so we have proved that trace of AB is equal to trace of BA for any two matrices A and B. Now we need to prove that similar matrices have equal trace. Let's see how we can use the above fact to prove what we desire. All right, so since A and B are similar matrices, B can be written as C inverse AC. So now we look at trace of B, which is equal to trace of this. All right, and now what we do, look at AC. We have to flip AC and C inverse. We've seen that we flip the matrices, two matrices. If we just interchange the two matrices, the trace remains unchanged. And that's what we'll use with the matrix AC and C inverse. So it's C inverse AC, it becomes AC times C inverse, but we know that C times C inverse is identity. Therefore, A times identity is equal to A. Therefore, this entire expression is equal to trace of A. So we have shown that we have started with any two arbitrary similar matrices, and we are able to show that the traces are same. Traces of the two similar matrices are same. Therefore, we are done with the second subpart. Now let's look at the final part to finish this problem 4. Yeah. So next we need to show that the rank of the two matrices are same. And here we have to use the key fact that when we multiply a matrix by any invertible matrix, the rank remains unchanged. Let's recall the proof, how it happens. Okay, so we see that REA lies inside RA. Why does this happen? Because every row, how is row of E times A obtained? Okay, how every row of E times A is obtained by a linear combination of rows of A. Okay, because we know that any invertible matrix can be written as product of elementary matrices. Okay, so using that and this fact, this happens. And once this happens, we know that the dimension of this is exactly the rank of EA. So this will tell us, this particular thing will tell us that rank of EA is less than equal to rank of A. And now similar thing we have to do with RA. RA can be written as R of E inverse times EA. Okay, which is contained in R times EA by the same logic. All right, and therefore we see here that the rank of A is strictly is less than equal to rank of EA, and clubbing the two, we have that the rank of A and rank of EA are same. So we see here that when we multiply a matrix by any other invertible matrix E, the rank remains unchanged. Okay. So let A and B be any similar matrices, two similar matrices. So by definition, there exists invertible matrix C such that this happens, so that A and B have the same rank. Please note that in order to show this, we have to apply the above fact twice. Okay, so let's start with B and A, let's say. Okay, so we have to prove that A and B have similar rank. Okay, so let's start with A. So we know that C is invertible matrix, therefore A and A times C will have the same rank. Agreed? So we know till now that A and A times C have the same rank. Okay, now A times C has the same rank as C inverse AC because we just multiplied C inverse. All right, and which is exactly equal to rank of B. So rank of A is equal to rank of AC, which is equal to rank of this, which is equal to rank of B. So therefore A and B have the same rank. So just use